Hi, OCBC. I want to spend a few minutes talking with you about the theological exploration that we are entering into in our worship services from October the 4th through November the 1st, All Saints Sunday. During these 5 weeks, we are going to be immersing ourselves in the book of Ecclesiastes. This is a book of the Hebrew Bible that you may not have spent a lot of time with. You've probably heard a few select passages from it. One in particular put to music. You'll hear that about 3 weeks into this series in the service. This book is a book that has been full of controversy throughout history. There were some in the earliest days when the canon of the Hebrew Bible was being formed who thought that this book probably didn't belong in it. It doesn't have a lot of the familiar themes of divine presence and salvation history that we are accustomed to seeing throughout the Hebrew Bible and well into the New Testament. Themes like Exodus and the strong hand of God present with people. It is a book full of struggle and searching and even contradictions. It is a wisdom text, but it is a text that in some places extols the virtues and values of wisdom and the search for wisdom, and at other places suggests that searching for wisdom is folly and stupidity and absurdity, vanity, as our NRSV translation renders that text. That word vanity you'll see show up over and over again in the text. If you read this short book of the Bible before our first Sunday and maybe throughout the series, you'll see that vanity of vanities, all is vanity showing up. I want to invite you to hear that in several different ways. It can be translated variously as something like absurdity, or something like breath or wind, connoting something like ephemerality. This book, although it is at times rather pessimistic in tone, has been a book that has been vital and important to folks throughout history as well. In his letters and papers from a Nazi prison, Dietrich Bonhoeffer references and quotes and cites and reflects on Ecclesiastes and its wisdom that made sense to him in a particular way in that period of his life. One of the primary conversation partners that I've been engaging as I've been preparing for this is Elsa Tamez, one of my favorite biblical scholars, who's written a book on Ecclesiastes. And if you're looking for a guide to read alongside the book throughout this series, I'd encourage you to look at her text. It's very accessible, pretty short. I believe the reprinted edition has a different cover, but when the horizons close. Elsa Tamez is a Mexican biblical scholar who's taught most of her life in Costa Rica. Comes from a very liberationist perspective. I'm going to read you a couple of sentences from the very first page of her commentary. The book of Kohelet, and Kohelet is a word meaning teacher. It is how the writer of Ecclesiastes is referred to, and so the book is often referred to as Kohelet. The book of Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes, has become timely again today when horizons are closing in and the present becomes a hard master, demanding sacrifices and suppressing dreams. By reading Kohelet in both today's context and its own context, we can see it from angles that we hadn't seen before, fresh perspectives that affirm real, everyday life with its feelings and sensuality, spaces of good life and grace in the midst of a dehumanizing presence and in the face of inscrutable horizons. This is a book selected for this time because in these next 5 weeks we are entering a very difficult season in our country's history. Many of you have been quite involved and engaged in thinking through what the coming days are going to mean for us as a congregation, and I believe the book of Ecclesiastes is one that is sort of off the beaten path of the typical wisdom that we draw upon in the biblical tradition. Things like the mission and message of Jesus with its very clear orientation toward justice. Ecclesiastes engages themes of justice too, themes of government, themes of oppression, but with a kind of ambivalence and uncertainty. And I think that this emotionally reflects something about the time we are living through right now. It is also a book that foregrounds the earth in its message. This is going to come through in the sermons, but will also come through in some of the bulletin art that I've been creating from photographs that I've taken around my own house. In fact, I chose this spot right here at the corner of OCBC to film this little introductory video because I remembered this morning when I woke up that there's a huge vine that's been growing up the side of this corner of the church. It's one of my favorite spots at OCBC because of that vine and the way that it clings to and climbs up this stone-cut wall. And then when I came out here this morning, I saw the dried kind of stumps of that vine. And then noticed that even though the vine is no longer there climbing up to the very top of this corner, there is this sort of new life, smaller vines that are continuing to reach up this pathway that this big old vine used to cling to. There's something about that that reminds me of Ecclesiastes. And very importantly, though the book often has a pessimistic tone, there are themes of death throughout the book, themes of wondering about the value of our work and our strivings. There is also this consistent, persistent, insistent theme of joy throughout the book. The author, the teacher, Kohelet, continues to suggest to the readers, to his or her co-explorers in this wisdom journey, to engage in the joys of life as they present themselves, because these are the gifts of God. So as we get into this exploration together, I want to ask you to think really intentionally every week about this question. Where are you finding joy in your life right now? In the midst of the difficulties and the disheartening things that we are experiencing every day in this difficult season, where are you experiencing joy? And it may be even more important to think about how are you cultivating joy right now, this week, and each week as we move through this series. And I'll close with this quote from Wendell Berry that I think is so indicative of the very attitude of the writer of Ecclesiastes. Wendell Berry, that great farmer, poet, and environmentalist, who said, "Be joyful, even in the face of all the facts." I look forward to joining you in this exploration and in our co-journeying toward wisdom and toward a search for joy, even in the midst of uncertainty and disheartening times. I'm glad to be in this journey with you, and that piece of it is going to be vitally important as we explore not what the book means for us personally and individually only, but what the book means for us as a community, searching, seeking, striving to follow that path of compassion and peace and justice. See you soon.